So does your dog.
Yeah. And then we were up there at 8 a while ago.
Get the people, their programs, and they come up here.
Yeah. No Piper.
Well, we lucked out today.
Oh, finally.
This is great. They owned us this one, didn't they? Well, we ought to have a nice crowd. And all the actors and everybody's ready to go. Yeah, this looks like this.
Glasses on for me.
Well, these aren't really for me, they're for Cindy. Aren't they great?
We don't know how many of them.
So when she gets here, she can.
Looking good, Chris.
You've at least got that advantage not having to go down the old dirt street downtown. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hello, Alice. Hello. How are you? Hi there. You look just smashed. We have a speaking part today.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
Had to memorize it, baby.
wait till
Not
I
a man
forget
of the
all
cloth
these
this
days.
time. Wait till I say 19 something instead of 18.
The Mad Hatter. Thank you, Debbie.
Hello there, Dad.
They all
You
answer
work.
anything.
I know it. I just came from Big last week.
I didn't show any sign. Well, he's probably going to be getting ready any second now, so yeah, he's heading in that direction.
You want me on your right?
Yeah, I'd like to have you on my right if you could.
Is there a Marilyn Holt in the crowd? Marilyn Holt. Is Marilyn Holt in the crowd? If she is, would she come to the mic here, please? Marilyn Holt.
Morgan. Morgan. Huh? 1609. You guys are 1600. I thought you were 1500. What'd you do moving on me? What'd you do moving on me? You guys are both 1600, right?
If you folks will all kind of start moving in this way and kind of make us a half circle out here in front. We're going to start just as soon as some of the folks down to the north of us here. And the Parson's Son welcome all of you to our Oakwood Tour. This happens to be the third one. Can you hear? Move in a little bit closer then. All right. We're real proud to present this tour to you today. Beautiful weather, as some of you know. We tried 3 times on Morgan Avenue tour, so we hit it just right today. We want to welcome all of you back to October the 8th, 1889. Now, I said that on purpose. That's 100 years ago. Want to welcome some of the old class members, as I might call them, that are here on the reunions, if there's any in the crowd. They see a lot of changes in the community. So we want to proceed here. But first I want to read a proclamation by Mayor Mary K. Ramsey. Whereas Oakwood Cemetery was established in June of 1872 as a city cemetery of the city of Parsons, Kansas. And whereas many of the original settlers of the city of Parsons are interred in this cemetery. And whereas many of the settlers were veterans of the Civil War and therefore contributed a great deal to the history of our community. And whereas the purpose of the tour on Sunday, October the 8th, 1989, is to honor the Civil War veterans interred at Oakwood Cemetery and to the part they played in the development of this community. Now therefore I, Mary K. Ramsey, Mayor of the City of Parsons, Kansas, do hereby proclaim Sunday, October the 8th, 1989, as Historic Oakwood Day, and urge all citizens of the City of Parsons, Kansas, to participate in this event in gratitude to those that contribute so much to the history of our city. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Parsons, Kansas, to be affixed this 18th day of September 1989, signed by your mayor, Mary K. Ramsey. Now it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce the gentleman who will guide us in our tour, an individual who has put many, many hours. He told me not to say this, but I'm going to say it. Our tour guide is a charter member of the Iron Horse Society and one who is a past president and worked very, very hard in seeing the Iron Horse Society progress as it has. He's presented many, many tours downtown. As I say, this is the third one here. Maynard spends many, many hours researching such areas as this cemetery. So without further ado, I want to present to you local historian Maynard Harding.
Thank you, J.D. Well, good afternoon, and it is not raining. Those of little faith, all the preachers in town have been working all week for this. I want you to thank them next Sunday, would you please? This is our third tour of Oakwood, as J.D. said, and probably not our last. This is our 7th historic tour in the city of Parsons, and there are many familiar faces here. Now, quickly, is there anyone from the high school class of 1937 or 1938 in the crowd? Nobody that old, okay? That's what I wanted to know. This is an interesting place to research. We have 370 Civil War veterans. What in the world? There's always something that happens, you know, when you get ready. Who is that? Who is that guy? Pardon me, sir, but who are you? Who is Albert Passwaters? What do you do? Oh, you are? Well, you've got it looking real nice, I must say. Do you live around here anywhere?
Yes, me and the Senator of Oakwood Tour.
Is that right? Well, what are you doing out here right now?
I'm getting ready. They're supposed to have a tour this next week.
No, Mr. Passwater, it's not next week, it's this week.
Oh, well.
Now, that was Roger Area, ladies and gentlemen. Albert Passwater. If you have a program, I'd like for you to take a look at it real quick. On the inside of the front cover, shows you our line of march, if you will. Monument to the Unknown Soldier. Now, if you'll all come back up to this road, to the main road, that we got a deal for you. You too, Jim. Could we had a prettier day than this? I think we just lucked out, Sonny. How many's here? 20 people here.
About 600.
Come on down. Come on down. You're going to have to come down probably another 50 or 75 feet, everybody, so we can get everybody up the hill here. We got several right in here, so you'll have a good seat. Yeah, come on up the hill, folks. Let's go on down a little farther. We got some right in there for you, but go on down a little farther, if you would, please. Can you see down there? Okay, you're good shape. Good shape. I just wanted to pause a minute and give some of the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts a chance to get up here from the Avenue of Flags. They like to listen to. We found many stories about our Civil War veterans out here. Many different kinds of men. Really the same kinds of men that have fought in every wars before and since. But listen to what Teresa Flynn has to say about this man.
Good afternoon. This afternoon we will be honoring a number of Civil War veterans. I would like to tell you about George W. Hawk, one of those veterans who was a very prominent Parsonian. George Hawk was born in Fayette County, Ohio in 1843 and was only 6 years old when his family moved to Illinois. He was reared in Champaign County, Illinois, and in 1861, at the age of 18, he enlisted in Company I, 25th Regiment of the Illinois Volunteer Infantry. He first served in the Army of the Cumberland, participating in the battles of Stone River, Missionary Ridge, and Chickamauga. He also marched with General Sherman from Chattanooga to Atlanta. He later served in the Army of the Southwest. His entire military career lasted 39 months. After the war, he completed his education, taught school, and was employed at the First National Bank in Champaign, Illinois, before moving to Parsons. He was assistant cashier of the First National Bank of Parsons the year the bank opened in 1872. The First National Bank of Parsons was founded by Robert Stevens, who was superintendent of the Katy Railroad. He married Lena J. Hodges in 1875. Their family home was at 1430 Grand. They didn't have any children, but Harry Bryant Sr., another prominent Parsonian, was their nephew. He helped reorganize the Parsons Commercial Bank in 1878 and was the manager and cashier for 34 years. He was also a member of the Antietam Post of the GAR, was very active in the preservation and beautification of the Civil War veterans area in Oakwood Cemetery here. He was also active in the Methodist Church, the Masonic Order, and he served as city clerk and city treasurer. In his obituary in the Parsons Sun, dated April 7, 1912, it said, and I quote, "Lena Hawk survives him and mourns the death of a husband who was always tender and true and gave to her in the riper years of more mature manhood all the devotion of a younger lover of his earlier years." Pretty flowery, huh? The stone entrance to Forest Park was erected by Mrs. Hawk as a memorial to George Hawk. Mrs. Hawk died in 1945 44 at the age of 93.
Thank you, Therese. Very nice card. It is said that when the Civil War was over, that 225,000 men died of disease and infection. This is probably pretty accurate. We did not have antibiotics. We didn't know about germs. Many soldiers, indeed, when they were wounded, refused to go to the hospital. We have a soldier buried at Oakwood that was wounded 7 times during the course of the war. Refused to go to the hospital, and he survived. But what kind of a doctor would have to operate in those kind of conditions? What would he think about when that war was over? Would he be satisfied with what he did? Well, if you'll turn right around, Ann Kennett is going to tell us about Dr. Joseph Lamb.
Okay, let's go. Parsons Eclipse in 1875 was a complex man. Dr. Joseph B. Lamb, born in Lincolnville, Maine in 1827, became one of Parsons' most prominent leaders after a variety of occupations. He took the degree of Doctor of Medicine in 1852 in New York. 10 years later, he entered the Union Army as a contract surgeon with the 35th Missouri Regiment. At the close of the Civil War in 3 years, he was mustered out with the rank of major. The atrocities of the war, however, must have made Dr. Lamb reassess his calling as a physician, for he gave up his practice. He opened a drugstore in Boston. Having married Hannah Sargent in 1854, just shortly after he obtained his medical degree, he brought her with him to Kansas in the fall of 1866, and they opened a mercantile store at Osage Mission. 8 years later, they moved to Parsons, and he established the weekly newspaper, The Eclipse. The following year, he added to that the Daily Eclipse. He was a man prominently known for his controversial views on politics, religion, and education. Dr. Lamb was described by fellow citizens as being independent in everything and neutral in nothing. A writer of both prose and poetry, he was considered one of the finest in the West. Dr. Joseph B. Lamb died at his home at 1631 Grand on December 26, 1890, at the age of 63. He left behind 3 sons, a daughter, and his wife Hannah, who was to live for another 40 years.
Thank you, Ann Kennett. When most of us come into an old cemetery like Oakwood, at least unconsciously, we look at the big mausoleums and the big family headstones, and the assumption we make is that those people were probably the most important people of their time. But when we started our research at Oakwood July the 1st, we came across this little stone. Let's hear what Jan Chubb has to say about this little stone.
We are here today to honor the memory of George A. Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds was born in September of 1830 in Chemung County, New York. He was educated at Elmira, New York, and at the Albion Seminary in Michigan. In 1850, at the age of 20, he went to California during the gold rush, where it seems he amassed a fair amount of money in mining and mercantile ventures, but lost it all. During this time, he became acquainted with a number of influential men, including Governor James Denver. In 1852, Mr. Reynolds was elected to the California Senate. In 1856, he returned to Elmira, New York, and married Miss Julia R. Judson, daughter of Colonel W. R. Judson. That same year, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, along with Colonel Judson, came to Lawrence, Kansas. On February 18, 1858, Mr. Reynolds was appointed Recorder of the Pawnee Land District by his friend Governor Denver. George and Julia Reynolds, along with Colonel Judson, were among the early citizens of Fort Scott, moving there in 1860. Colonel Judson, who was attached to the 6th Kansas Cavalry, was the first mayor of Fort Scott. There still exists today a street named in his honor in the city. George Reynolds was the 3rd mayor of Fort Scott, and in 1862 he was elected as a state representative from Bourbon County. On March 21, 1865, just 3 weeks prior to the assassination at Ford's Theater, President Lincoln appointed George Reynolds as agent for the Seminole Indians. His job was to help the Seminoles rebuild their settlements, which had fallen into disrepair. The Indians respected and trusted Mr. Reynolds, and on many occasions he was asked by the chiefs to go to Washington to lobby on their behalf. Although he was reappointed as Indian agent, Mr. Reynolds resigned in 1870 to take a position with the MKT Railroad as a land agent. He was responsible for securing the right-of-way through Indian Territory, what is now Oklahoma. The Reynolds family came to Parsons in 1872. They purchased land and built their home where St. Patrick's Church now stands. On May 13, 1872, the street we know as North Central was named Reynolds Avenue by order of the City Council. Unfortunately, that same year, the Reynolds' eldest son, George, died. In May of 1879, Mr. Reynolds was appointed as Assistant Sergeant-at-Arms of the United States Senate. His main function was as the superintendent of the Senate folding room, where he was responsible for assembling and collating various documents and legislation for the senators. Just 2 months later, on July 20th, Julia Judson Reynolds died, leaving 3 daughters and a son. While attending the 1880 Democratic National Convention in Cincinnati as a delegate from Kansas, Mr. Reynolds was taken ill. He returned to his home in Washington, D.C., where his health seemed to improve. In early July, he dictated a letter to his daughter, Rose, and enclosed money for the children's Independence Day fireworks. However, a sudden relapse occurred, and he died on July 6, 1880, of typhoid pneumonia. It was reported that George Reynolds' funeral was the largest ever held in Parsons at that time, and that the funeral procession was composed of over 60 carriages and wagons. George Reynolds was survived by his daughters, Elizabeth Kleiser, wife of Dr. Joseph M. Kleiser, Rose, age 10, Olive, age 7, and his son Burton, age 15. Although no record of military service could be found for George Reynolds, his contributions in many other areas enriched the lives of the people he knew, and his accomplishments are well worth remembering.
Thank you, Jan Church. Just one other thing about George. He had a brother in Parsons. His name was Milton Reynolds, founder and publisher of the Parsons Sun. We just thought you'd like to know that. Okay, let me get ahead of you. Come on in on this little road, some of you. Our next soldier is a man by the name of Merritt Noyes. Merritt was severely wounded during the course of the war, but he came here and became a very important man in our town. Let's listen to Linda Baker talk about him.
Today I'd like to take just a few moments to honor Merritt Noyes.
Turn it up so I get
Merritt was born on August the 15th, 1842, in Abington, Massachusetts. He enlisted in the Union Army of the 4th Massachusetts Infantry during the Civil War. He was severely wounded in the knee and hip, of which he never fully recovered from his injuries. He received a pension of $18 a month for his disabilities. He was a graduate of East Hampton College in East Hampton, Massachusetts in 1867. He was a friend and a schoolmate of Dudley Haskell, who was a representative of Congress in the 2nd Congressional District of Kansas. And it was through the encouragement of Representative Haskell that brought Merritt Noyes to Kansas in the spring of 1868, coming to Lawrence, Kansas. He came to Parsons in March of 1871, the same month that the city was founded, locating on a land claim at about where 10th and Chess is today. He, Mr. and Mrs. Noyes, erected the Parsons House Hotel and operated it as one of the nicest hotels in the area for several years. He later became a partner in the city bank of Angel Matthewson. He was very successful in the real estate and insurance businesses. On June the 11th of 1881, Mr. and Mrs. Noyes purchased the lots at 1424 Broadway, where they started construction of their beautiful new home, which still stands today. They completed construction of their home in February of 1883. But unfortunately, Merritt did not get to enjoy their new home, for death came to him that same month. He left his wife, Helen, and his 2 children, Mary and Alfred.
Now go on down, folks. We got several things to do right in here. Glad to see all of you. Thank you for coming. Okay, you're probably good where you're at down there. Come on up, folks. Pearl, glad to see you made it. Ernie said he's glad I came too. Oh, good. What's the reason? Our next soldier was an old sheriff of Labette County. He was called Fogg, I believe. Cal Bush knows a lot more about that than I do, Bobby.
Good afternoon. I'm here this afternoon to honor Andrew Fogg Edwards. He was born in Laurel County, Kentucky in 1843. His father, Charles, was born in Wales and came to America with his 3 brothers during colonial days. All the brothers aided in the colony's struggle for independence. One brother was killed in Yorktown, another in Roundstone, Virginia. Andrew grew up in Kentucky and got his education in the public school system there. He enlisted in the Union Army in Company L of the 1st Kentucky Cavalry and served under Colonel Wolcott until the end of the war. He was with his regiment when they fought in the battles of Murfreesboro, Mill Springs, Atlanta, and in the entire Georgia campaign. He, like his father before him, also had 3 brothers in the service. He marched with General Sherman in the celebrated March to the Sea and participated in the Grand Review at Washington at the close of the war. This was the finest military pageant ever seen. In 1865, Fogg married Sophia Benty. In 1869, he began a railroad contracting business and aided in the building of the Cincinnati Southern Railroad. Then in 1877, he came to Kansas. and formed a contracting railroad business with Mr. Wolcott. And they constructed the Kansas City Pacific Railroad, which began just 8 miles north of Parsons and went to within 15 miles of Paola. He did 3 years doing repair work for the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad. He later was elected the Lebec County Sheriff in November of 1897 for a 3-year term. He was again re-elected for a 2-year term. Andrew Fogg Edwards and his first wife, Sophia, had 6 children. He and his second wife, Sarah, had 5 children. The Edwards home was 5 miles southeast of Parsons, and his wife, Sarah, died there, November 19, 1919. After his wife's death, Fogg's health also began to fail. And on December 23, 1919, just 34 days after his wife's death, Andrew Fogg Edwards died on a train near Joplin, Missouri, en route to Eureka Springs, Arkansas for his health.
Well, thank you. Did a beautiful job. In the fall of 1878, we had a visitor in our town, a lady. Her name was Julia Ward Howe. She was here to see an old girlfriend, Ella B. Wilson. Ella B. was head of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in our community. Also, heavily involved in the women's suffrage movement of the day. But then again, Julia Ward Howe was too. Her interest in the women's suffrage movement. Most of us remember her, the lyrics to a song that she wrote during the course of the Civil War. You'll turn around.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. Our God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. His day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
If you'll just come on down the road.
Oh.
Come see the mud hole. I told you I wanted you to get your feet wet today in our history. Oh my. Hello. Just come on down a ways. Didn't Chris do a beautiful job with that song? I tell you. Make Grandma cry. Sure, I lost money of that. Are we having fun yet or what? Are we? Isn't this interesting? All these beautiful girls in their lovely dresses. You think we've had all that up to now? This soldier became very important in our community because he was a soldier. He came here, he was concerned about the veterans' rights. Let's listen to Linda Kaler tell us about James McKee.
We're here today to remember James O. McKee, who was born in Washington, Virginia on June 30th in 1842. In 1864, at the age of 22, he was drafted into the Union Army in Company H of the 146th Illinois Volunteer Infantry. He served with distinction and he earned the rank of sergeant. And although this regiment was one of the last to be raised in the Civil War, it served with distinction also until it was mustered out at the end of the war. It appears that the 146th was part of the Tennessee Army and part of the occupation of the South when in the field. James and Martha McKee came to Parsons in James and Martha McKee came to Parsons in 1871. Parsons was founded in the springtime on March 9th in 1871, and lots were being sold at a little wooden depot just west of what is now the Judicial Center. When the McKees were coming to Parsons, many other people were coming to Parsons also, and they were all coming for the same reason, because Parsons was going to be a boom town. There were jobs and opportunities for everyone who was willing to take a gamble. The MKT Railroad came into town, laid down the town, built houses for its machinery, and set up shop here. It wasn't soon before this town was known as the infant wonder of the West, and within 3 years' time its population had grown to 2,000 people. When the McKees came to town, Mr. McKee was a livestock dealer. He later became a United States livestock inspector. In 1903, he assumed the position as superintendent for the MKT Railroad stockyards on the north edge of town. He held that position until he died. Now, Mr. McKee was a very community-minded individual. He served as a city councilman, city marshal, and city engineer, city fire chief. He also was very prominent in the Masonic bodies, and he was involved in politics. He was really involved in the Labette County Democratic Organization. In 1882, the McKees moved to their new home in Parsons at 1603 Appleton. They had one son, and his name was William. Now, Mr. McKee died a sudden death of a heart attack on June 9th, 1918. His wife lived 7 years longer, but she died December 9th, 1925.
That's Miss Linda Keeler. She has a beautiful shadow lady back here. Did you notice that? Let's take just a short break. If you haven't had your sarsaparilla yet, let's have a short sarsaparilla right up here on the corner, and then we'll go on with our tour, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, come on up a little farther, everybody. Go on down a little farther if you would. This is the best looking group we ever had. That's worth $1 a head for the Iron Horse, I think. You know, the Civil War was really not much different than most wars before or since. Young soldiers pretty much thought about the same thing. They worried about dying. They worried about their families at home. Well, we'd like you to listen to a letter that was written by a soldier with the same concerns. Richard Dirth, read us that letter, will you?
Only by listening to the warriors of the Civil War can we hope to possibly understand the terror of that war and yet the humanity of the warriors. This is an opportunity to get to know a common soldier from some letters that he wrote home to his wife. We only know that Joseph was a part-time farmer and school teacher from the state of Ohio. He enlisted at the age of 40 in the Company B of the 114th Regiment of the Ohio Volunteers. On January the 11th, 1863, he wrote from on board the steamer Crescent City. My dear wife and child, through the merciful protection of the good Lord, I am again permitted to send you a few lines, which will inform you that of which you are most anxious to hear, namely that I am still alive and as good a shape as I could expect, considering the fatigue and exposure that I have been lately subjected to. Now, my dear wife and child, every night and every morning, I pray to my Heavenly Father to bless and comfort and protect you both, and to grant me the greatest happiness, for Jesus' sake, of again meeting you both on this earth, that we may be united again as a family. Joseph gives many accounts of the battles that he's been in, even graphic accounts of hand-to-hand combat that ensued. But the accounts of the battle are not why we wanted you to get to know Joseph. He summarized his descriptions of these battles by saying, "Oh, I cannot describe the battle on Sunday, but will say just that from sunrise till sunset, it was one continual roar of musketry and artillery." In a March letter, we learned that Joseph was paid $39.75, of which he promised to send home $28 as soon as he could find a way to do so, because it wasn't safe to send money by mail. Joseph answers an apparent demand of his wife to return home by saying, "You say that you would like to have me at home. Well, I would like to be there myself if I could get there honorably, but surely you would not like to see me come home as a deserter and disgrace you and your child. Well, perhaps it is as well for me to be here now as not, for conscription law would catch me anyhow. So I will try to stand in might and trust in the good Lord for deliverance." On July 1st, 1863, Joseph reported his health was quite good, and he was happy with the results of a foraging expedition he had been on. He said, "I got lots of roasting ears, plums, cucumbers, peaches, and blackberries," and he bragged about the pies that he made once he returned to camp. Joseph said of the war, "Vicksburg is not yet taken. There are a great many offering to bet that it will be ours against the 4th of July. If I live, and it's taken, I'll write you as soon as I can." Joseph said, "Well, about this time last year I was in the harvest field, and I would much rather be there today, even if I had to toil from daylight till dark for 50 cents or even nothing. For when the day was over, I could go home to my dear little family." Joseph had just learned that Ada, his wife, had given birth to another child, a boy named Josie. And to this news he commented, "Oh, how I'd love to see my dear little Ada and little Josie, whose eyes have never been permitted to look on the face of his father." Joseph said he was proud to have a son, and if the child lived, Ada would have a nice little playmate. Now to you, my dear wife, who have had to struggle long, alone, for 9 months as best you could, and you've bravely borne up under your trials, I will say hope on and hope forever. It is said that soldiers have no time for sorrow, yet I think I find enough time for it. I never thought there would be so much suffering and anxiety crowded into my life as there has. On July the 4th, Joseph proudly announced, "Vicksburg, the maiden city of the South, surrendered today on the glorious 4th of July about 10 o'clock, and it has occasioned great rejoicing in our camp." The letter was full of good news. There was talk of a furlough, and Joseph got another $26. He described the battles of Raymond, Champion Hills, and Baker's Creek. Joseph's only problem was that he was overcome with heat and had to go to the hospital. And the regiment was sent on to Vicksburg. He went on to rejoin his regiment the next day, feeling much better. Foraging netted some nice corn, but he said, 2 weeks ago I saw corn in a garden higher than my head. But oh, the desolation of this country where the armies pass. They devour everything like an army of locusts. In this letter, he sent along a poem that he had written on the battlefield of Warrenton, Mississippi, as he guarded the dead in the dying of that battle. The poem is entitled A Guard Soliloquy, and it goes like this. Extinguished was each glimmering lamp, and silence reigned throughout the camp, save where the guard with weary feet slowly trod his lonely beat. And if it rain or hail or snow, and north winds do rudely blow, we face the breeze as soldiers should, and bear it for our country's good. Hardships like these we do not heed in this country's time of need, but bravely fight in freedom's cause till rebels do obey the laws. This heritage to us was given. We prize it as a boon of heaven. And in the cause of truth and right, as soldiers we intend to fight. The heritage our fathers gave, the flag that o'er them did proudly wave, on many a hard-fought battlefield, to traitors we will never yield. Then rouse ye free men one and all, obey your country's urgent call. Gird on your swords and bravely stand as guardians of your native land. From east and west in crowds come forth, and from the regions of the north, let Erie's shores send forth a band, and come from Huron's storm-beat strand. Ye sons of patriot sires attend, your children's, wives, and home defend. Fight till our flag in triumph waves o'er rebel soil and rebel graves. The call is answered, hark the strains, from bleak Iowa's snowy plains, and old Kentucky in battle true. Here with Ohio's sons we view. Now in serried ranks they stand, a patriotic gallant band. Brothers in battle side by side, their country's hope, their country's pride. That's all we know of Joseph, because that was the last letter that his wife ever received. Joseph died of typhus fever at Vicksburg, Mississippi on August the 6th, 1863, never again to return home and never again to see his family. It may be of only passing interest to know that Joseph was my great-great-grandfather.
Harry Strasburger from Coffeyville is with us today because he wants to hear his daughter, Sally Lundblad, tell us about her soldier. Sally?
We're at this point to honor Leonard J. Steele. Leonard J. Steele was born in Kings County, New York on February 22nd, 1843, and while still an infant, began his journey west by moving with his family to Indiana. He resided in that state until 1860, when he came to Kansas. At that time, he located at Rockford, Bourbon County, 15 miles west of Fort Scott. On July 14, 1861, he was mustered into the Army, having enlisted as a private with Company F of the 3rd Kansas Volunteer Infantry. After serving with the regiment for 6 months, it was consolidated with the 4th Kansas Regiment and was redesignated as the 10th Kansas Infantry. He continued to serve with that regiment as a veteran until he was finally mustered out in September 1865, having obtained the rank of Sergeant of Company B. In 1867, he moved to Liberty Township, Labette County, residing there for 1 year while farming and operating a blacksmith shop, and afterwards moving to North Township. He and his brother started a sawmill in 1868 on Labette Creek, near where Little and Big Labette cross, about a mile southeast of Parsons. It was the first sawmill in the area, supplying lumber for the homes of the many incoming settlers. The sawmill was located close to the general store of W.K. Hayes, who in September 1869 opened the first post office in the area. The post office was called Mendota, an Osage word for meeting place. Mr. Steele operated the sawmill until 1871, and he continued to live on his farm until 1874 when he moved into Parsons. At that time, he opened a wagon making and...
Roger area, where are you? Roger? Oh, you already got black and white here? You already got black and white here? Excuse me. I want you to notice the shadow ladies back there. Aren't they pretty? This soldier was a very interesting young man. And Cindy Jackson is going to tell us all about him.
George B. Sage was born in the state of Illinois on May 18, 1835. Now, at the outbreak of the Civil War, he was 26 years old, and he enlisted in the Union Army in Company C of the 13th Illinois Volunteer Infantry. This was at Ambroy, Illinois. Now, he served with his unit until the close of the Civil War, and during this time, he was promoted from private to captain for meritorious service. Now, the 13th Illinois Infantry fought in the Tennessee campaigns, and these included the battles of Shiloh, Chickamauga, and Lookout Mountain. In his book, Illinois in the Civil War, Victor Hicken noted that the 13th was known as the Stealing Regiment for its expertise in foraging. And in fact, on one occasion, they were known to have stolen a regimental surgeon's stove, including the fire, while the surgeon's back was turned. Now, at the close of the Civil War, several years later, in 1877, George went to work for the MKT Railroad. He worked as a passenger conductor there in Denison, Texas, for 10 years. Now, Denison was one of the cities laid out by the MKT Railroad, and it was in September of 1872. Parsons was the first on March 8 of 1871. In the late 1880s, George and his wife Alida moved to the city of Parsons, and they made their home at 1424 Belmont. They resided there until after 1890, at which time they lived at 1823 Crawford. George was one of the best known and oldest conductors of the MKT Railroad. He was also a prominent member of the Order of Railroad Conductors. He worked for the railroad until a few months prior to his death, which was on October 24th, 1893. He left behind his wife Alida and 4 children. Alida later passed away on August 17th, 1900.
Miss Cindy Jackson. Thank you, Cindy. Very well done. If you will all just turn around. For William Wallace Cranston, Congressional Medal of Honor winner from the Battle of Chancellorsville, May 1863. He did not receive his Medal of Honor stone until 4 years ago. We dedicated this stone 3 years ago with the help of the Army's Color Guard from Fort Leavenworth. Today, we would just like to stop and pay our respects to William Wallace Cranston and ask Bonnie Simpson to lay a rose on his Medal of Honor stone. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, let's go on up the road, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's slow her down. We've got some right in here. Go on down just a little farther if you would. What do you think of these dresses? Aren't these beautiful, these women are wearing? As long as beautiful women in them, too, I might add that, of course. Speaking of beautiful women, June Crabtree is going to tell us about her soldier.
John W. Hoke was born in Xena, Ohio. He was born April the 11th in 1842. John lived in Xena until the age of 14, and then he moved on to Elmwood, Illinois. At the age of 20 in Elmwood, he chose to join the 102nd Company C Infantry Volunteer Division. He served with this infantry division for 3 years. When he mustered out, he returned to Elmwood, Illinois. Then in 1872, he moved to Parsons, Kansas. He came to Parsons as construction engineer. Married Lizzie McCline here in Parsons. They had 3 children, John Paul, Red Percy, and Jessica. John W. Hogg died at the age of 68. He died on June 30th, 1910.
That's June Crabtree. Thank you, Judy. We have all kinds of interesting soldiers and beautiful ladies and a little bit of both. This next one I think you'll find very interesting, with Miss Linda Sreppel telling us about him.
J. Lewis Huguenin was born in New York State in 1840 and grew to manhood there. At the start of the Civil War, he joined the 153rd New York Infantry, Company C, attaining the rank of sergeant. He served under the command of General Nathaniel Banks and fought in the Red River Campaign. General Banks began his campaign in Louisiana to secure the west bank of the Mississippi and to isolate Port Hudson. He hoped to stop the Confederate supplies and to destroy the 4,000-man Confederate force of General Taylor encamped west of New Orleans. General Taylor fought back several attempts by General Banks' troops and then fled away upstream. It was during this action that Sergeant Huguenin was wounded. He was dismissed for his wounds on June 22nd, 1864. He received $6 per month pension for his disability. Jay and his wife Eva moved to Parsons in 1872. He worked as a baggage conductor for the MKT Railroad in the new 2-story brick depot. This building took the place of a smaller structure that was wooden and was used by the MKT Railroad when it was built through from Junction City to Parsons in 1871. The family home was in the 1700 block of Corning until 1880, when they moved to 1610 Appleton. Eva died on February the 15th, 1892, when at this time Jay moved into an apartment on Broadway. Mr. Huguenin was very active in the GAR, serving as post commander and fighting for the rights and benefits that he felt were important to the old soldiers. He died
on July 26, 1905, and he was survived by his 4 children, Rosa, Jenny, AC, and Royce.
There have been many patriotic songs since America was started. Most of us know about all of them over the years. But here's the Barbershop Quartet.
America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
On my right is Marlon Hoffman singing first tenor, Andy Horner on second tenor, Pete Hughes singing baritone, and down here on the end is... This indeed is our 7th tour in the last 3 years. These people devote a lot of time and energy to producing these tours. There are many other people involved. It's taken over 100 people to do this tour today. Now, why am I talking to you about this? Because I'm hoping that you will call me and say, Maynard, I want to get involved. I want to do something besides play golf or bridge or bowl. I want to do something interesting that will maybe benefit our community a little bit and make me feel better about where I live. So if that's you, call me. Well, is this going to be the last of the tours? Are we all through? May 1990, next May. The Main Street Avenue Walking Tour. From the bank corners to the post office. A couple of our people have already started digging. Have we got a deal for you? Mary Hughes is always telling me, Maynard, well, come on, tell the rest of that story. Well, we're going to tell some of the rest of the story on Main Street. But again, if you would like to come and help us and join us, let us know. We thank you for your attendance and your attention. And good day to you.